Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest Hedera virtual meetup. I'm Cooper, a developer evangelist at Hedera Hashgraph, and I'm really excited to be kicking off episode 1 of our MVP Spotlight series. Over the next few months, we're going to be having all of the wonderful Hedera MVPs in our community so they can talk about what they're up to and you can get to know them better, and maybe they can help you, build or answer questions that you might have in our community. So today, in the first episode, I'm really excited to have Craig, Nick, and Kent. These are 3 amazing Hedera community members that many of you probably already know. But just to kick us off here, Craig, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Craig Drabik. I'm with TxMQ. I lead the Disruptive Technologies Group, which, among other things, looks at blockchain and distributed ledger use cases. We are a consulting agency. So you bring us your ideas and a check, and we build your cool new tech for you.
That's awesome. I'm sure anyone from the early Hedera days definitely recognizes you, and it's great to get you on the live stream. And I know you're really active in our Discord too, so it's great to put a face to the name for everyone.
Great to be here.
Yeah, Nick, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Hello, hi Cooper, Nick here. So you may know me from Hashhash info. So I've been with Hedera since the last hackathon, not the one we just had, the one in 2018. So it was a crazy 1.5 years now, a bit more than that. So, and what I've been doing is working a lot with the consensus service, Hashhash info, and trying to figure out new ways to disrupt. So hello future there.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Nick, for being on the live stream today. And, thank you for building Hashhash Info, one of the original network explorer for Hedera Hashgraph. So I'm excited to dive into that and talk, more about the work you've been doing on the Hedera consensus service. And for those who have been, following really closely, maybe we can even talk about the Trust Bucket project that you had for the Hedera 20 hackathon. Kent, how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself next?
I will. Thank you, Cooper. My name is Kent Makashima. I'm co-founder of Armada Chain, which we build like the supply chain, decentralized infrastructure built on Hedera Hashgraph. I've been following the Hedera team since 2017, but actively developing since 2018. So I like to consider myself one of the more older members of the community the last couple of years.
Yeah, all 3 of you were really, really early into the Hedera community, not just, supporting what we're doing, but actively building, projects, dApps, open source frameworks, tutorials, blog posts. That's why you guys are all Hedera MVPs. And I'm really, really excited to have all of you here today and we can learn more about you. So what initially got you excited about Hedera? Maybe we can start off with Kent.
I'd say, ironically, I wasn't super excited about Hedera when I first heard about it in 2017. I ran into Lehman and it seemed like kind of just rambling to me of like, oh, this is better than blockchain. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. I'll take your word for it. But it wasn't until 2018 where I joined, the Hedera 18 hackathon, where I had my hands on to the actual prototype SDK that was available at the time, and really realized, there was some, weight behind, all these words that, what Hedera can actually do. And, I kind of just jumped ship from all the other blockchains I was building on and moved straight to Hedera. Ended up going through Helix and the accelerator in Hong Kong. Switching all my architecture of my company to Hedera Hashgraph. And then once mainnet happened, I was excited with the rest of the MVPs and Hedera community to finally see the vision come to life.
That is quite exciting, and it's awesome that you've been along the entire journey from the initial Hedera 18 hackathon. I think a lot of our users and community came out of that event, but it's great to see that you're here and you're still building Armada chain and open waters on Hedera, over 2 years later, which is, really awesome. Nick, can you tell us what got you excited about Hedera?
story is a little bit like Ken's. The reality is that I was dragged into Hedera. So it was a time where
Figuratively drugged into Hedera, right?
wait. So there was a time I was playing with EOS and not too happy about things, and I wanted to be a little bit more, do a little bit more DLT stuff, then forget about the whole DLT scene. And then a friend of mine who works in the London fintech sector told me, "Hey, check this out." I was like, "Come on, can't be bothered." And he basically made me subscribe to the hackathon back then. So I attended the hackathon. I learned about Hedera 3, 4, 5 days before the hackathon, and I really thought this one is it. So there is substance in this project, and I like substance, and it was also quite academic, which I liked. There was the Koch proof at that time, and I was like, okay, this is something I might actually invest my time in. So this is how I got into Hashgraph. Yes.
That's awesome. Another Hedera 18 origin story, which is, wonderful. I remember talking to you in the early days actually about how you were really excited about the Koch proof and our formal methods verification and how seriously we took our approach in that regard. So it's great that you're still around, still building Hashhash info. And, we'll talk more about what you're currently working on and all the fun Hedera consensus service stuff. Craig, could you give us some background on yourself? Why are you so excited about Hedera?
Sure. I kind of fell into this accidentally, to be perfectly honest. I was looking for a changing career and stumbled upon a company that happened to be local. I'm in Buffalo, New York, so it's not a huge software mecca by any stretch of the imagination, but was pretty surprised to find a company who is interested in blockchain and DLT, which I actually didn't know anything about at the time I took the job. They were the ones that pointed me at Swirlds at the time. So pre-Hedera, this is going back to about October of maybe 2017, I think it was. So started working with the Swirlds SDK, and as I was learning about the space and didn't already have experience developing on Ethereum or EOS or any of the other platforms that were popular at the time, really took a look at the space and the challenges within the space at the time, one of which was scale and transaction speed, and looked at Hedera and thought, okay, if the technology is real, or again, Swirlds at the time, if the technology is real, that solves some of these really fundamental problems that are really preventing people from delivering real enterprise use cases, which is my background. So started building, started playing with the SDK, putting the technology through its paces, and just started drinking the Kool-Aid from there. When Hedera was announced, and worked with the team to help to vet the API design and all of that, just got more and more excited. Till we got to Hedera 18, that's where it sort of became real. All of a sudden we had rooms full of people all over the world building applications in the hackathon on that system, and been around ever since.
That is really great to hear. TxMQ has been wonderful, a wonderful partner and systems integrator for us. And, we're really lucky to have you and, this whole support from your team. So I know that you build the Aviator DLT framework, Craig. Could you talk about that and maybe anything else that you're building on Hedera these days?
Sure. Starting with Aviator. Aviator is a project that goes way back. It was originally called EXO. It goes back to the Swirlds SDK, which at the time when I started playing with it, even still to this day, it's really just the consensus mechanism. It's gotten a little bit bigger and more feature rich over time, but it's not really an application development framework, and most especially it's not something that is super accessible to your typical enterprise Java developer. So Aviator grew out of my desire to make it more accessible to people with an enterprise Java skill set. So it will wrap the SDK with the ability to deploy REST services, WebSocket communication, some database integration, a way to log history actually in a blockchain data structure. Interestingly enough, Lehman gets rid of the blockchain, and the first thing I do is add it back. But there are definitely use cases where that kind of audit trail is required. We did deliver a project based on that framework for our customer Intiva Health. So shout out to them. That was one of the really early Hashgraph applications. And today we've kind of shifted the focus of the framework to being able to disintermediate consensus and business processing, which made it a really, really great fit when HCS, Hedera Consensus Service, came along, because that's its whole purpose. So unplugging the Swirlds SDK and plugging in HCS literally took like an hour to build and test. Super clean. So if developers out there, if you're looking to build HCS applications, I would encourage you to give Aviator a look, and hit me up on Discord if you have any issues. I'm happy to help people trying to deliver on that platform.
That is really great to hear. I knew Aviator was this really out-of-the-box solution for the Swirlds SDK, but hearing that it only took, an hour or so to move it over to the Hedera Consensus Service is music to my ears at the very least. So that's really, really great. Are there any things that you're excited about kind of coming in the future for the Aviator DLT? What problems is that solving for people coming in?
It really kind of gets you out of having to learn about and deal with the mechanics of distributed ledger platforms. You basically write handler methods in Java and annotate them as to what stage of the transaction lifecycle you want them to run in, and then that code is just plain old Java code, right? So once you learn how to navigate the framework and how to hook into the event lifecycle, it becomes really easy for people to just write code the way they're kind of used to writing code as Java developers, and not have to really worry about the mechanics of sending a transaction to the network, or in the case of HCS, like if you have a large transaction, you need to break it up into smaller pieces and then reassemble it on the other side. The framework can help you to do that, which is one of the features I'm working to integrate from the consensus service extensions. But really it's a sort of easy, as you said, out of the box way. I don't have to figure out how to wire this into Spring Boot. I don't have to figure out how to wire this into whatever framework I'm used to. I can just write JAX-RS web services. I can write handler methods. I can give it my key and topic ID and point it at HCS and hit play in Eclipse, and it all just starts up and runs.
That sounds like it's going to save a lot of people a lot of time and headache. So really, really cool to see that you're still building that and that you brought it over to Hedera with the release of HCS.
It's also open source, so plug for anybody out there who's building on it or looking at it. If you develop features that you think are interesting to others, send a pull request. It's all out on GitHub.
That's a great plug. Thank you for remembering to do that, Craig. We would love for you to contribute to any of the open source software in the Hedera ecosystem, and Aviator DLT seems like a great place to start. Nick, I know that you built Hashhash Info, one of the first network explorers on Hedera. Could you talk a little bit about that project and kind of the genesis there?
Okay, Hashhash Info, how it started. It started way before open access and way before data was available on the mirror. So what Hashhash Info was doing, it was basically polling and interrogating the nodes, asking them, what about that account and what about the other account, and so trying to get data this way. And after open access, it became an explorer like the ones in Ethereum, or like we have now bigger explorers like Kabuto or Dragonglass. And what Hashhash Info tries to be is a little bit the although I'm a hardcore developer, I try to have my projects to be accessible by non-developers. So I try this explorer to be a little bit the people's explorer, if you like, just clutter-free transactions, see who sent money to whom and things like that. So I'm trying to get a new version out maybe in August, which will bring a little bit more exciting features in it. So what I always try to do with that Explorer is to have it a little bit of a financial analysis tool, see a little where the money flows, this kind of thing. So and now I have a little bit more time play with Hashhash info and want to put more time in it. So yeah.
Yeah, you always got to follow the money. I really like your little visual bubble tool where you can see, transactions flowing to known exchange accounts and out of known exchange accounts. And, the progression of those transactions throughout the day is a really interesting UI that I haven't seen before on other network explorers.
Indeed. So the idea here is to make more such interesting tools, and I want to make them open source is one thing, but the other thing is I want other people to contribute. For instance, I do get requests, Nick, can you run that type of query, or can you run the other type of query, because there's something I want to check. I'm trying to find a way how people can build their own query. So how can you build your own query? How can that database sustain people running their own queries without the whole system toppling over? So that's something I'm very interested in achieving. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the future releases there. And after Hashhash Info, I know that you were really focused on the Hedera consensus service, thinking a lot about it, building some cool tools. Could you just provide some context there? What have you been building with the Hedera consensus service?
So I have a little bit the same. If you look at Aviator, you will see that this is a kind of the life cycle of a DLT Hedera Hashgraph developer. So you start with sending transactions, and then you're like, there must be a better way. So which is what Craig does. So Craig was a little bit way ahead, realizing this thing. So and I'm. And the Hedera team also figured out that there must be a better way to send transactions to Hedera. So like Greg also said, how do we chunk messages when they're too big? How do we stitch them together? How do we encrypt messages? Because I'm just a developer, I don't know how to encrypt things. I just need to, call a function that says encrypt. How do I handle a feedback? How do I fetch something from the network? Because we have all this mirror and all these moving parts, but I'm just a developer. I just want them to include a library in my Java code and just send and receive. This is what I want, and this is what these tools do. Aviator, a big part of it does that, and the work I've been doing on HCS tries to achieve also a lot of these things, and I'm pretty sure that at some point Aviator and these things will somehow converge, because everyone has his own ideas how to do things, and the more users we get, the more these things, I believe, converge, because we don't know yet what's the right thing to do. Everyone has his own opinion about what the right thing to do, but with more users, we'll find a way to converge a lot of these ideas.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that is fascinating. It's great to hear that you think that there is, some point in the future where we will converge on some of these standards, ways to build things. Those really important things like encryption, decryption, chunking, as yourself and Craig spoke about. Those are really the key kind of building blocks that are, going to end up in every HCS application.
You will end up doing that yourself. You will end up doing that yourself. If you do not study too much left and right, you will end up doing that. So better you look at Aviator or other libraries that are out there. Or better maybe end up doing it yourself and find then ways for us all to converge to get the best bits and make one big nice bit out of it.
Yeah, super insightful, Nick. And I know another project that you actually worked on with, Brady Gentile and a few members of the Hedera team is called Trust Bucket. And we're actually using this on Hedera.com right now to verify certain aspects of our website using the Hedera consensus service. Could you talk a little bit about what Trust Bucket is?
Trust Bucket. It's Trust Bucket is basically.
And do you like the name? That's important too.
I love the name. That's not my idea. that's Brady's. That's all Brady. So you see, Trust Bucket is what I've been trying to say about Hedera for the last 1.5 years. You really need a handful of code, not much, half a file if you like, to get something useful going. And I believe Trust Bucket is useful to Hedera. So it is a service that timestamps PDF documents when they are sent to an S3 bucket, and the S3 bucket then spits out a timestamp, a consensus, all the consensus information and stuff like that. But the important thing is that it is really just a few lines of code. You don't need to be an expert in DLT to write something like that. One of my advantages developing a DLT is that I didn't spend too much time understanding Ethereum and Bitcoin and this and that. So just have, the very, very broad concepts. And that's what I believe we are now, in this is the stage we are now in, where a Java developer can just take the service and use it as a service. This is what we want it to be, consensus as a service. Just don't ask why and how. And okay, of course, everything is exciting, like gossip about gossip and how. No, all I care is that I do send an instruction to a server managed by this big council member, and it comes out from another one that's managed by the other big council member, and that transaction has been seen by these guys, and that's all I need to know. So there's a lot of business applications that I can apply this stuff to, and I just need to understand what it means semantically, sending them a transaction and getting it back, and don't need to see the clutter back there, because if I deal too much with the gear work, then if I try to figure out how the gear work in a switch watch works, then I may not be able to read the time.
That is awesome. I know that we're currently using it to, we have an S3 bucket from Amazon Web Services out there, which we actually upload the PDFs of our council meeting minutes. And with Trust Bucket, we take, the hash of that file and upload that to the Hedera consensus service and display that information in an actual transaction on the hedera.com website. So if we ever change that file and the contents in the future, you would be able to know that the file wouldn't generate the same hash with, Trust Bucket. So to me, knowing how ubiquitous something like Amazon S3 is, it seems like a very easy integration point where anyone could start to build in this cryptographic proofs and these hashes and the trust into something that's currently centralized exclusively by Amazon and exclusively by whoever's operating that S3 bucket.
You mentioned PDF, and that was right, indeed the original idea to do it for PDFs. But then Greg Scollett, who contributed in Trust Bucket, had the idea, why do we do it just for PDF? Why don't we do it just for any file? So this is how we ended up with S3 buckets. So it is not just for PDFs. It is for any file. You can write in a Word document some idea and upload that Word document in S3 and just notarize that idea. Make sure that you have proof that you had it first.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I'm sure that the community will see us more and more starting to use HCS on various aspects of our website, our applications, and really kind of showcasing, things that we think as a team are interesting use cases for it. So thank you, Nick, for sharing, some of the awesome things that you're up to. It's really great to have you continuing to build and moving from the Explorer side to the framework side to the demo app, and all of these other things is really great to watch. Kent, I know that you have been an early member of the Hedera community. You came out of the Hedera 18 hackathon and actually were incubated in the Helix Accelerator program. Could you tell us what you're up to and what you're building on Hedera?
Right. So still, building on, Armada chain and expanding there. Recently, we did release what we call like our open waters module, which is like almost like an open source, library and APIs to integrate decentralized supply chain functionalities, as well as, the infrastructure required to build decentralized track and trace. So it's kind of about the same train of thought that Nick has, is that, for developers, they don't really need to know, how decentralization works, the consensus mechanism, account creation that's required with, Hedera Hashgraph. But instead, what we did is we abstracted all of that, plus the functionalities of the Armada platform, such as, generating supply chain flows, organizing different stakeholders, privacy permissions, and etc. And made it very simple functions that if you are building your own type of track and trace platform or supply chain infrastructure, you can just put in these functions to, build out the base decentralized layer that you need for your platform. It was mainly just inspired by how we connect to different ERP and different systems and customer stakeholder ecosystems. And we said, why can't we just take this and just give it access to everybody? So when, people are deciding, I want to build my own supply chain platform, not only can they build, using our infrastructure, but the cool thing is now it can be connected to any other supply chain or DApp built on Hedera Hashgraph, because HCF is now that macro infrastructure layer that can connect to all these different systems. So it's kind of a cool thing that comes out of using HCS is now, since it is on this public domain, albeit encrypted, of course, it can be, accessed and be streamed down to different types of applications, which I really think opens up this new idea of interoperability and collaboration that can be created now in the Hashgraph ecosystem.
That is fascinating. I know a lot of different projects and companies and enterprises are all exploring supply chain like solutions, whether it's, tracking coffee from growers to your actual cup, which we actually just saw with the IBM Food Trust, or, there's hundreds of supply chain use cases out there. How much more efficient do you think it is to use something like Open Waters and Armada chain rather than having to build all of that internally?
I think it just comes down to, from my experience working with all these different enterprise companies, people really don't like changing from their existing workflows. Putting in a new system usually takes like a 6 to 7 month onboarding period for people to, oh, I have to use this software now, I have to do this type of program. But instead, just using Open Waters, you can insert it like a couple lines of code into your existing code base, into your existing systems, and really nothing is changing on the workflow side. But you do have the integration with Hedera Hashgraph. All the account creation and management is all done through Armada, and it's just a simple like user ID and identifier, opposed to saying, oh, this is my account ID, I need to remember these 8 to 9 like digits, and then reinsert that everywhere. But we kind of just make sure that it's a very much more human like reading lines of code than it is just what we assume, like, oh, I need to know like these keys, etc.
That is definitely a big trend that I see is large companies, even some small companies, don't want to have to go and invest in building out a new type of infrastructure, maybe even having to hire and staff up a team that is familiar with, that specific system. And so being able to integrate natively into just about any infrastructure that's out there definitely seems like a compelling reason to use not only Hedera, but Open Waters and Armada chain specifically. So that's really great that you're kind of building in that direction. I definitely see that as a big trend in the space.
Yeah, it's been a pretty exciting to see like all the possibilities people have been talking to us that they can start using now. We do offer it currently in I think Java, Go, C, Python, and Node. So whatever flavor of code that you like best, we make sure that there's something for you to use to integrate with Hedera Hashgraph.
That's wonderful to hear. If you're looking into supply chain solutions, please check out Armada Chain and Open Waters. Get a hold of Kent. He's really easy to find online. But Kent, I also know that you recently participated in the Hedera 20 hackathon. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did during that event?
Yeah, so I've been very fascinated with the entire concept of decentralized finance for a while. Hugely into like how do we speed up like settlement systems, collateralized loans, as well as kind of revamping a lot of financial tooling that we have today. And for the hackathon, I kind of built a prototype for something called Wrapped HBAR, which was inspired by a series of conversations between me and another like pillar of the Hedera Hashgraph community, Pablo. And actually, Pablo did deploy Wrapped HBAR. So for hashing systems, I would definitely check out that and look at that project as a whole. But essentially, what Wrapped HBAR is, it's a wrapped ERC20 token on the Ethereum ecosystem that's pegged 1-to-1 against Hedera's value. So it allows people that are Hedera token holders to essentially engage with the DeFi ecosystem of Ethereum, and kind of gives a lot more opportunities that if you hold on to HBAR and you're a long believer of Hedera Hashgraph, you can actively use it in these other blockchain ecosystems. This really opens up more of like the interoperability concept that decentralized finance is built on top of, but also likewise encourages and exposes Hedera Hashgraph and HBAR more to decentralized finance users. So hopefully in the long term, we'll see a lot of those users migrate back into the Hedera Hashgraph ecosystem as DeFi continues to grow.
That is awesome, and it's really cool to see that become an initial project out of the Hedera 20 hackathon. I've been talking to Pablo, like you said, for probably months about Wrapped HBAR and ways that we can bring DeFi to the Hedera ecosystem. And so it's great to see so much momentum. Like you said, this was a Hedera 20 hackathon project. Pablo and the hashing systems team actually deployed a version of Wrapped HBAR to the Hedera testnet, which is really exciting, and you can go learn more about this. That was perfect timing as well, Kent, because someone asked in our YouTube chat, how can Ethereum and Hashgraph communicate in decentralized finance?
Yeah, so I think that Wrapped HBAR is one of the first opportunities that is available to do that. I think it's the same concept of why Wrapped Bitcoin and like stablecoin layers were created in Ethereum. So that is like one of the interactions. I think that HCS can actually open up a lot more doors in decentralized finance, just because you can use it kind of like as a macro monitoring consensus system between ecosystems. That if a smart contract executes in Ethereum, that can be published to HCS and it can be pulled down to a Hedera fee app. Or if you have an oracle that submits to HCS, which that data is pulled down to an Ethereum smart contract, which can trigger something also in the Hedera ecosystem. It really connects all of these things that we need for decentralized finance. Instead of having to do all of these wrapped coins and ecosystems, if things can act natively at their true speed in their native ecosystems, but yet communicate through this macro consensus layer, we might have a much faster DeFi system than we do have today.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think of HCS and Hedera not only as something that can connect Hedera to other blockchains or networks like Ethereum or Hyperledger Fabric, but actually being able to connect, Ethereum to Cosmos or Ethereum to Hyperledger Fabric, and using Hedera as an interoperability layer between other chains that may not even need to care about or even know that you're using Hedera as the kind of bridge between these networks. So that's really fascinating. So next round of questions is kind of a rapid fire, okay? Starting off with Craig, I'd love to know what advice you have for someone new to Hedera.
Oh boy. Should have been better prepared for this, I suppose. I guess I would say, a number of the answers that the three of us have given as far as the projects we're working on and the things we're interested in speak to the idea that we're coming to a stage, especially with Hedera, where you don't really need to know all the gory details and all the guts and all the nuts and bolts. And I think I would encourage people to not get too lost in the details, right? Kind of trust the math, trust the technology, start nibbling at the edges with real use cases, use some of the work that people have already done to make it easy for you to get started and get going. Eventually, you know, if you are the kind of person who likes to tinker with the nuts and bolts like I am, eventually you'll find a place where you can contribute to that. But if you start by trying to really understand the nitty gritty of every last detail, you're going to wind up lost and you're not going to be able to get work done. So take a step back, keep the end in mind, leverage what's out there, and get something going before you just take a, you know, hold your nose and dive in.
That is great advice, Craig. So people shouldn't just dive into the Coke proof and try to compile and verify that immediately.
Yeah, that would be my advice. You know, the Hedera or the Hashgraph white paper, the original Hashgraph white paper, it's a compelling read if you're a math head. If you are not, you know, you're going to get about 10 pages in before you lose your place in all of that. That doesn't mean that you can't use this technology, right? Nobody really knows all of the details of how a database optimizes your query, but we use them every day to drag data out of the database. So approach it that way. You don't need to boil this ocean. You can be productive right away with the tools that are out there today and learn the details as you go.
Great advice, Craig. Nick, what advice do you have for people coming into the community?
Along the same lines as Greg, I mean, Hedera Hashgraph is not only an algorithm. It is a council. It is a council and an algorithm, and these two together should be enough for you. You don't need to delve into the gear work. So this council that Hedera has managed to bring together should be enough for you. So if you need trust, there it is. So don't worry about the algorithm, which is great. So the other thing you can do as a developer is go check out the GitHub examples. There's stuff, advanced examples like how to implement a financial settlement system, or with UX and you name it, it's brilliant stuff. Or how to harness message queues, how to write a small WhatsApp messenger, mini WhatsApp messenger with HES and message queues. Very fantastic examples. In the hackathon, we've seen very fine examples how to talk to Kafka. Why I'm sticking with queues and messages and this and that is because it is these places where you can easily tap into, if you like. If a company already is using message systems, you can just plug in HCS to wiretap, if you like, this message is listened to without, like Ken said, without disturbing too much the operations. You just tell them, look guys, just put here a small bug and that's it. You don't need to change the ways of working. And that thing in the background, by listening to your message queues, is notarizing everything. And the other thing I want to also address is that, you see, HCS has given us developers the ability to think about consensus. We didn't think too much about consensus. Consensus was for the core teams, the Bitcoin guys, the ledger people, our Lehman and our team. These were the people who were supposed to worry about consensus. Now we have that in our tool set, in our asset box, and we start walking down that developer life cycle when we now think about consensus. We now start thinking, and we also here as a team will have developers have started to think, how can we make new, great, better services with this consensus service that has been exposed to us? How can we here form a small mini council so that we can do our own little site network, if you wish? So things like that have not been available before to you. I mean, you could run your own hyperledger networks, which is great, of course, but there's too much stuff you need to learn. So here we have an opportunity to just use the consensus service, which, by the way, plugs into hyperledger at this time of recording. But we have now the opportunity to form new ways of creating our small little networks and trust each other without trusting. That's amazing stuff.
Yeah, that is really amazing. I love what you said about how at some point, you know, distributed consensus was really only for the Bitcoin folks, the cryptographers, the Lehman Bears of the world, and we're really making it accessible to anyone out there who wants to integrate those types of technologies into their applications. Kent, do you have any final words or advice for people coming into the community?
Well, I feel like, it's hard to top all that good advice from Craig and Nick. They pretty much hit it on the head that, the Hedera Hashgraph ecosystem is actually, the community is still fairly early, but we do have a lot of good tools and examples that are being put out there by some very dedicated members. And there's no reason for people to go out there now and be like, oh, I need to build another block explorer, or I need to build it's another way to connect to HCS. There are plenty of tools available that are great and proven and community backed, that you can definitely dive into the ecosystem. I think like one point to consider though that I like to talk to anyone that's considering implementing DLT is that as much as you can just dive into and implement code, I would take a brief look and understand develop an understanding, why Hashgraph is different than the rest of the other blockchain ecosystem. You don't have to dive super deep into, how consensus works, how exactly, the council members are chosen and etc. But understand, how a council system and why it's been chosen for Hedera. Why our micropayments work extremely well on Hedera Hashgraph, how, the smart contracts do use Solidity. I think a lot of people forget you can do smart contracts on Hedera. So look into that as well. The existing file system, as well as, what is HCS? I think is a very good starting point for people to take kind of like a shallow dive into before they start just building, because then, you'll have a better understanding of what you need to build. And I'll help refine, especially a lot of ideas that require, a little bit deeper of an understanding when you start building your first B app.
That is also really insightful, Kent. I appreciate that. And a lot of people do forget that we support Solidity and have a file service and these other kind of supporting services outside of the focus of Hedera consensus and our extremely fast micropayments. So Kent, you're working on easy to build supply chain tools. You just built something for interoperability and decentralized finance for the hackathon. Outside of those two options, is there anything that you would really like to see built on Hedera?
Yeah, so it kind of all comes back to decentralized finance. I think it's what needs to be done, whether it's community or Hedera led, is we need to start working on token standards. I think that with that in place, we won't see an ICO boom like we did in Ethereum in 2017, but instead, I think it'll encourage a lot more projects to not just migrate into Hedera, but to start implementing, a token system for interoperability between dApps. Once we can create like a stable token layer, we open up in ideas of, like a DAO, loans, being able to, track successfully, pieces of data, or exchange virtual currencies around the Hedera Hashgraph ecosystem. Whether it is a currency or a point system. I think that once these standards are in place, both NFT as well as something maybe like an ERC20, it would open up so many possibilities. That being said, we can always import the standards from Ethereum over to Hashgraph because it does use the same Solidity engine. But maybe we start tailoring it a little bit to compensate with the fine points of Hashgraph, as well as maybe throw some incorporations with HCS in there as well.
Really insightful. For anyone who wants an Easter egg, maybe dig through our GitHub and see some of the things that we've been working on. Nick, what would you like to see built on Hedera?
That's a very good question. You see, I'm very interested in virtual machines. This is basically my background. I'm a compiler engineer by trade. So my interest has been always, how can we distributively execute a piece of code? How to maintain a state machine? Right now, we do have the council that maintains this state machine, which is our Ethereum VM run by the council run by Hedera. And now we also want to see, normally with the consensus service, how can we maintain a state, the 5 of us? There are nice examples in GitHub how to do it, but it's also very interesting to figure out how to to create standards around this idea so that not everyone does his own thing. There's no single standard how to write state, how to maintain state. And having said that, because very nice, Kent, you reminded us that there is still the solidity that works fantastically on Hedera. One thing that I have to admit is that I've been a little bit of an extremist with HCS. So HCS, I said, and death to smart contracts I proclaimed a year ago. But the reality is that, you see, we should also look a little bit in solidity and try to figure out where is the common ground. How can HCS basically trigger solidity contracts, things like that? Question, how can we play a game of chess and have a smart contract decide who's the winner? So we can use these two services, HCS and smart contracts, at the same time. HCS is going to record our moves, for instance, and the smart contract is going to, which is basically the only thing that's linked to the HBAR on the metal. It's the smart contract that's going to give out the money if I don't have a way to find 5 friends to build a council, so because I'm a developer and I don't have many friends anyway. So the smart contracts are still there and they have their place. So we need to find a way how to link these two things in a coherent and balanced way. So
that is really interesting. You know, if you ever need to stand up a council in the meantime, I'm sure Kent and Craig and Lena and other members of our community would be happy to help you bootstrap that network until we can create something like you're talking about. Craig, what would you like to see built on Hedera or more generally in the Hashgraph community?
I think at this point, a lot of what I'm interested in building or seeing built is really more external to the technology itself, more knowledge sharing, just general education for IT professionals, for developers, for people who are interested in the tech, for the general public. You know, how can a technology like this, in a way that my 70-year-old mother can understand, right? How does this help her be safer on the internet without her having to really understand the mechanics of how it works? But what can this bring to your architecture? As I think it was Nick who said, you know, we can do this in ways that are really non-disruptive to a lot of what's already out there. So once we start adding trust to the kinds of interactions that regular non-technical folks have every day, understanding what the benefits of that trust are going to become really important in just building the ecosystem and making this grow and really solving problems. For DLT and distributed systems to really solve problems in a big way, they have to have a big reach. They have to have a really global reach. And part of that is really just educating people as to why choice A is more important than choice B or better than choice B based on certain characteristics, one of which is trust. So I'm looking forward to seeing sort of the philosophy of DLT being boiled down from the crypto guys and the people, you know, sitting here presenting and talking on this live stream to a level of detail that the average person can appreciate and understand and put into practice.
I'm really looking forward to that as well. Anytime that, you know, there's only so many blockchain and cryptography engineers and distributed ledger engineers out there, anytime that we can make that a broader set of potential customers, potential people interested in Hashgraph, and convince, you know, a majority of those database admins, network admins, operations people that there is a good reason to integrate distributed ledgers and trust into a piece of your architecture rather than swapping it entirely, is definitely how we're going to see some type of, you know, mainstream adoption and mainstream awareness. So super insightful, and I couldn't agree more with you, Craig. So this is one of the last questions that I have for everyone. And if anyone watching this live stream has questions for either myself, Craig, Nick, or Kent, please put them in the YouTube chat and we will answer them after this last round of questions. But I'm really curious, Kent, what do you think the future of Hedera has in store? What are you most excited for about, you know, what's coming next?
I think personally, I'm always excited to see who ends up next on the council. I think the council itself is already very, diverse, both geographically as well as industry-wise. But I would love to see more, whether it's like more like finance or more like niche industries, come on, and not only do to show like support for the system as a whole, as well as bring more security to Hedera Hashgraph. It kind of shows like which industries are also looking at using DLT technology. So the more companies that come on, the more that look into more finance. If a bank comes on, which would be really awesome, I really don't think we'll ever see that. It will show support that this technology is being considered and potentially implemented, which is exciting for all of us. No matter if you're from the Ethereum ecosystem or Hedera Hashgraph, but to see the technology being used is something we all have been wanting to see for many years now.
That is true. Anytime that you see some of these big players that are, name recognizable brand names, your parents, your grandparents know who they are, moving into this space and considering and, joining an LLC officially in the blockchain and distributed ledger space is a great sign for not only us, but for the whole industry, which is, I'm always really excited to find out who's going to be next on the council as well. Nick, what are you most excited about for the future of Hedera?
I'm excited to see who is going to be on your MVP list next year. This time, you see, we just had the Hedera hackathon, and hackathons are such a great way to bring people into the platform, and the best Hedera friends, if you like, who are made over the last year, they were all, most of them were hackathon people. So, and I'm pretty sure that in this hackathon, there are new and very, very good people that, because it was so, I mean, it just finished a couple of weeks ago. So we don't know these people yet, but I'm very excited now to see who is going to be around for the next months. And there's going to be plenty of talent. I'm very excited to see them next year in that MVP list.
That is great to hear. For anyone who doesn't know, our MVPs are updated on an annual basis. Throughout this Spotlight series, we will be having all of the 2020 MVPs on to share, who they are, how they came to our community. But there's definitely, there are over 700 or 800 new members of the Hedera community for the Hedera 20 virtual hackathon. And we're definitely going to be seeing some fresh faces in 2021, which is, I couldn't be more excited about. Craig, what about you? What are you excited about for the future?
I guess I'm excited. It's easiest to answer this by example, right? Until we had mobile phones that had GPS and broadband internet over the air and integration with payments, we couldn't have ride sharing, right? So we have a new toolbox, and the first thing we try to do is to build the stuff that we've always built with the new toolbox, right? But sooner or later, somebody takes a look at this from a different angle and they say, oh, I can do this really oddball idea. And it might be oddball now, like the idea of having a stranger show up and pick you up and drive you to the airport by your mobile phone would have been really bizarre 20 years ago. And now it's something that we all do all the time. I'm interested to see those use cases start to appear where people have really gone outside the box and really taken a different look at the technology and realized that they can use it to do something really interesting that wasn't possible or feasible before. Micropayments, I think, are a big part of that. We've all talked quite a bit about HCS. I think we're all super excited about HCS for a bunch of reasons, but the micropayments features in Hedera really enable that in the first place, right? To be able to pay for consensus ordering of small messages on the order of tiny fractions of a cent. Even having that base layer to be able to do that has enabled something like HCS, which is going to enable many, many, many other use cases. So I'm interested to see those use cases start to come up.
Absolutely. There are certain things that you couldn't do on centralized infrastructure that this new decentralized and trusted world enables. And the idea of Uber or Airbnb are things that weren't even remotely in the realm of possibilities a couple decades ago. I couldn't be more excited to see what people get to come up a few decades from now. So Kent, is there anything that you would like to plug at the end of this live stream? Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so as always, I'm always gonna plug Armada chain. You can find us just searching through Google, but definitely check out the Open Waters repository on GitHub. Get started. We do fund any account that gets there with minimal HBAR, so you can get started developing right away without worrying about the entire funding, the account creation process. Otherwise, I do write a lot about Hedera Hashgraph, both on Twitter. My handle is Makashima, so it's pretty easy to find my name, as well as Medium. So if you're ever interested in more Hedera Hashgraph content or anything specific about DLT, feel free to reach out to me on any of those channels as well as LinkedIn. I'd be happy to not just discuss about it, but also if it comes to a point where I want to write a piece about it. I think I'm always happy to spread more knowledge content like education about Hedera Hashgraph and DLT in general.
That is great. And one of the many reasons you're a Hedera MVP, I loved the post that you had about the coupon bureau's use case.
Thank you.
So Nick, where can people get in touch with you, find out more about what you're doing, or is there any, open source projects or things that you want to promote while we have you here?
Well, not at the moment, but you can find me if you Google my name. Something in LinkedIn will come up, a horribly unmaintained profile with a picture I took 15 years ago. so the other place is in Hashhash info. There is a link to a small Telegram community I maintain, which I try to have it to be something between developer chats, hardcore, and business talk. I try to be a little bit more into the business talk. So because I talk too much about bits and bytes in my daytime, so when I'm in the community, I prefer not to talk so much about bits and bytes. So yes, so via Hashhash info, you can come to my little Telegram group and try to figure out. I share a lot of ideas that sometimes people think they're good. Sometimes people think they're crazy. So, but we do find consensus a lot of times. So.
Yeah, that is great. I would say, I don't post in Telegram. I do watch the channels, and your channel is one of my favorite little enclaves of the Hedera community. So if you want to reach out to Nick or learn more about what he's doing, get all the Hashhash info on Hedera Hashgraph, you can go join his Telegram chat. Craig, where can people get in touch with you, learn more about Aviator or TxMQ?
Yeah, TxMQ.com for the company, especially if you are working for an organization, you need help designing, developing, delivering DLT applications, especially on Hedera. That's the place for you. AviatorDLT.com is for Aviator. That is probably a little bit out of date, but it will link you to the GitHub. The GitHub is kind of where the money's at. That's where all the code is. There's a number of samples and example applications and things like that to help you get started, as well as an onboarding tutorial. LinkedIn and Medium as well. I'm sort of an occasional Medium and bursts. There'll be a bunch of things for me in a couple of weeks, and then there'll be nothing for a couple of months, and then another burst. But those are primarily the places to get a hold of me, and also Discord. I do keep an eye on Discord, and available there to help out.
That is awesome. So thank you all so much for joining the first episode of the Hedera MVP Spotlight Series. We're going to hang out just for a few more minutes to answer any questions that people may have dropped in the YouTube chat. But anyone who wants to get in touch with these folks or the other members of the Hedera MVP community, if you want to say, or group, please don't hesitate to reach out. They are all experts on Hedera Hashgraph and very active members of the Hedera community. So I'm gonna, just stroll through the YouTube chat here and see if anyone has any questions. Someone asked, is Hashgraph still charging people licenses to use their product? Craig, since you build on both Hedera and Swirlds, do you want to answer this one?
Sure. That is a Swirlds thing. As far as I know, there are still licensing fees for production applications. Hedera, there are no licensing fees. You pay as you go with HBARs for the services that you consume.
Well said. That is true. If you're interested in, private permissioned Hashgraph deployments, check out Swirlds. If you want to use the public network of Hedera with the council member nodes, the mirror nodes, the cryptocurrency, and all that good stuff, no license is required at all. Just pay a little HBAR depending on what you're doing. I think Christian Hasker, our CMO at Hedera, made a statement. I don't know if it's him. People pretend to be Christian all the time because who wouldn't want to be Christian? He said, I think the current MVPs should decide the next roster of MVPs. What do you think about that, Kent?
I think that's actually an interesting idea. Kind of to go off, what Nick was saying earlier about, it's really great to see this next. I don't want to call it generation. That makes us feel old. But like the next group of like MVPs that are coming together of like these enthusiasts, will definitely like identify and we'll know who these people are in the community. And I think that the MVPs, since they already have such they focus already a lot on like what projects are rising, who are contributors, that by this time next year we already have like a rough sense of, these people should be the next MVPs without actually thinking too hard.
Any thoughts there, Nick?
I think there's somebody who wrote a voting system recently. I just cannot remember who it was.
The Attica team.
Exactly. So why don't we use the voting system to just solve that issue?
That would be pretty cool to use HCS to have the MVPs or the community at large actually vote on who are the next group of Hedera MVPs. And Christian is claiming that it's him still in the chat. So thank you, Christian, for joining the live stream here. Another comment in here says MVPs are key to developing the Hedera ecosystem. And I couldn't agree more. You are all incredibly valuable, and the community wouldn't be what it is without, everything that you do for our ecosystem. So I think that this actually concludes our first episode of the Spotlight series. Thank you, Craig, Nick, and Kent for your time.
Thanks, Cooper.
If anyone has questions, please reach out to them, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Hedera virtual meetup.